The keel is the spine of your sailboat. It is the heavy lead counterweight that fights the wind and keeps you alive. If the mast breaks, you have a bad day. If the keel falls off, you die. For decades, boat builders knew the safest way to attach a keel. You don't. You mold it inside the hull. It's called an encapsulated keel. It is solid, waterproof, and functionally immortal. But walk into a boat show in 2026 and you won't find a single one. Instead, you will find thin fiberglass skins and rusty steel bolts holding 5 tons of lead to the bottom of a luxury yacht. Why did the industry abandon the strongest design in maritime history for a system that is designed to corrode? They tell you it's for performance. They lie. The actual reason you never see encapsulated keels has nothing to do with hydrodynamics and everything to do with a semi-truck. Cut through the marketing noise and look at what is actually under your feet. Strip away the teak veneer and plush carpets, and you will find the real backbone of any serious blue water cruiser, a deep, solid sump wrapped in thick fiberglass laminate, cradling a slab of lead that is as much a part of the hull as the ribs in your own chest. This is not a bolt-on prosthetic or a fashion statement. It is the monocoque core, a single, continuous structure running from the deck, down the hull sides, sweeping into a keel cavity often 300 to 600 millimeters deep. On classic boats, Island Packet, Pearson, Contessa, Cape Dory, you will find this sump forming a well beneath the cabin sole, sometimes so deep you need a flashlight to see the bottom. That is where the ballast lives, entombed in resin and glass, unreachable by salt water, immune to the slow cancer of crevice corrosion. Run your hand along the inside of an encapsulated keel and you will feel the continuity, fiberglass layers sometimes 12 to 25 millimeters thick at the intersection. No seams, no bolts, no gaskets waiting to fail. The lead is poured in, locked down with more glass, and the hull and keel become one organism. When you ground this kind of boat at 6 knots, the energy spreads through the entire structure. The lead dents, the glass might scuff, but the boat shrugs it off. The ballast stays where it belongs, inside the boat, not hanging from a handful of metal rods and wishful thinking. Compare that to a modern bolt-on. The hull bottom is flat, the bilge barely more than a puddle tray, sometimes just an inch deep. Instead of a backbone, you get a stub, thin laminate, maybe 6 to 25 millimeters if you are lucky, with a grid of stainless studs poking through. The ballast is not part of the hull. It is an afterthought, a 5-ton appendage held on with bolts that, sooner or later, will rust, stretch, or snap. This is not the AK-47 of the ocean. It is a race car suspension grafted onto a minivan, fragile, fussy, and utterly dependent on maintenance you cannot see, and most owners never do. On the old boats, you can tap the sump and hear a dull, reassuring thud. On the new ones, you hear the hollow rattle of compromise. That is not just nostalgia, it is engineering. You can feel in your bones. Picture the moment a 22,000-pound cruiser meets an uncharted rock at 6 knots. That is not a gentle nudge, it is a sledgehammer blow, the kind that sends shockwaves from the tip of the keel straight up to the masthead, and every ounce of that force has to go somewhere. The math is not abstract. At that speed, the kinetic energy in play is about 50 to 75 kilojoules, the same as dropping a loaded minivan from a second-story window. But with a bolt-on keel, the story gets uglier. Instead of that energy spreading through a deep, integrated structure, it bottlenecks at a handful of stainless studs, each one tasked with holding back a tidal wave of force. Under normal sailing, those bolts carry a static load of maybe 4 kilonewtons each, enough to keep the ballast in place when you're heeled over, nothing dramatic. But the instant you run aground at speed, the numbers spike. The keel acts as a lever, and the impact multiplies the stress on each stud by a factor of 5 or more. Suddenly, what was a manageable load becomes 20 kilonewtons or higher per bolt, enough to stretch, bend, or snap even the best marine-grade steel. The hull stub, barely thicker than your wrist, is now absorbing a concentrated punch that was never meant to be focused on such a small patch of fiberglass. Encapsulated keels do not play by these rules. When they hit, the shock is absorbed by the entire hull, the lead deforms, the glass flexes, and the boat keeps its spine. Bolt-ons, on the other hand, gamble everything on a few threads of metal and a prayer that the factory torque wrench did its job. The difference is not theoretical. It is physics you can measure, and consequences you can see: cracks at the joint, weeping rust, the infamous Beneteau Smile grinning back at you from the travel lift. This is not about racing performance or hydrodynamic fantasy. It is about whether your ballast stays with you when you need it most, or tries to tear itself free the first time you meet the real world. Salesmen love to wave the word performance like a magic wand. They will tell you that bolt-on keels are the secret sauce for speed, slicing through water with a slender foil shape that would make a racing yacht blush. But here is the part the brochures never mention. On a loaded 45-foot cruiser, that supposed edge is a fantasy. You are not hauling carbon sails and a crew of Olympians. You are carrying a freezer, 2 bicycles, a library of cruising guides, and enough canned beans to survive a winter storm. The hydrodynamic argument falls apart the moment you fill the lockers with real-world weight. Ask any working shipwright who has spent years crawling around bilges, and you will hear the same thing. The only boats that benefit from those razor-thin foils are stripped-out racers chasing trophies, not families crossing oceans. For a true blue water cruiser, the drag difference between a properly faired encapsulated keel and a bolt-on fin is academic, measured in decimal points, not knots. But the risk is different. It is measured in broken dreams and insurance claims. Manufacturers love to show off computer renderings of sleek, high-aspect fins, but the reality on most production cruisers is far less glamorous. To keep draft shallow and fit more cabins above the waterline, they bulk up the foil, add wings or bulbs, and call it innovation. The result is a fat, stumpy appendage that looks aerodynamic on paper, but acts like an anchor in practice. Hydrodynamics are only half the story. The other half is load, how those forces travel from the keel into the hull. On a raceboat, every gram counts, and the structure is engineered to within an inch of its life. On a mass-market cruiser, corners get cut, the foils get thicker, the bolts get cheaper, and the grid inside the hull is just strong enough to pass the minimum standards. It is the illusion of performance, not the reality. A shipwright once told me, if you want to go fast, buy a raceboat. If you want to come home, buy a boat where the keel is part of the hull. That is the line in the sand. The sales pitch is always about speed, but the moment you ask what happens when you hit something, the conversation gets quiet. Performance is a convenient excuse, one that lets builders shave days off production, save thousands on shipping, and still charge a premium for a so-called cutting-edge design. The real reason bolt-on keels rule the market has nothing to do with going faster. It is about making boats cheaper to build, easier to ship, and more profitable to sell. The hydrodynamic myth is just the wrapping paper. Start with a hull fresh out of the mold, sitting in a cradle on the factory floor. The keel isn't attached yet, not because it is waiting for some high-tech alignment or hydrodynamic wizardry, but because it is about to embark on the cheapest journey the bean counters could chart. Here is the industry's dirty little secret. It is not about speed, not about innovation, and not even about safety. It is about getting that hull under the 4-meter mark so it can squeeze beneath highway bridges and slide onto a flatbed with no special permits, no pilot cars, and no bureaucratic headaches. That 4-meter ceiling, 13 feet give or take, sounds innocuous, but it is the invisible hand steering the entire keel game. Attach a 6-foot fin to a 40-foot hull, and suddenly you are staring down oversized load fees, lowboy trailers, and a parade of paperwork. The cost is $5,000 to $10,000 per boat, every single time it leaves the yard. Multiply that by 1,000 hulls a year, and you are talking millions of dollars shaved off the bottom line. Money that never touches the water, but dictates what is hanging off your hull. A logistics manager at a major builder put it bluntly. Drop the keel, set the hull low in a custom cradle, and suddenly the whole boat fits under bridges and through tunnels as standard. There is no need for special routing. There is no waiting for midnight convoys. Just line up a fleet of hulls, roll them out on schedule, and bolt the ballast on at the dealer. The hull and the keel become two separate stock-keeping units. One fits the truck, and the other rides alongside on a pallet. It is not about making the boat better, it is about making the spreadsheet look good. This workflow does not just save money, it shapes the very structure of the boat. The hull is molded flat, the bilge is shallow, and the stub is just thick enough to take the bolts, no more, no less. There is no deep sump, no monocoque backbone, and no time lost waiting for resin to cure around a lump of lead. Production speed goes up, shipping costs drop, and the finished product looks sleek in the showroom. But that convenience comes at a price you will not see until the boat meets a rock at 6 knots. The motive is locked in. It is not hydrodynamics, not performance, and not tradition. It is the 4-meter rule and the relentless math of mass production. There is a warning sign that every seasoned surveyor dreads. A hairline crack running along the leading edge of a bolt-on keel, curving up into a crooked grin. In the yards, they call it the Beneteau Smile. It is not a joke, it is a silent alarm. That crack is not just cosmetic, it is the first clue that salt water has found its way past the seal and into the dark, airless space where stainless steel studs anchor 5 tons of ballast to a hull stub barely thicker than your wrist. Here is what happens next. Water seeps into the joint, drawn in by every cycle of flex as the boat heels and pounds through chop. Inside that crevice, oxygen levels plummet. Stainless steel, which shrugs off rust in open air, starts to break down in the hidden world beneath the keel. The chemistry turns nasty. Without oxygen, the chromium oxide layer that protects the metal vanishes, and what is left is a breeding ground for crevice corrosion. The studs, usually 20 to 30 millimeters in diameter, begin to pit from the inside out, losing cross-section with every passing season. The process is invisible until it is not. A single weeping rust streak, a brown stain trailing down the keel, or a drop in torque when you check the nuts during a haul-out are the first signs. Surveyors have pulled keel bolts from 20-year-old production cruisers and found them whittled down to half their original thickness, eaten away in jagged craters. Sometimes, all that is left is a brittle shell. The rest has turned to orange dust, hidden by a smear of marine sealant and a fresh coat of bottom paint. On the outside, a boat might look ready for another season. Underneath, the only thing holding the ballast is a handful of compromised bolts and wishful thinking. This is not a rare defect. It is a design feature, an inevitable outcome of marrying dissimilar metals, stagnant water, and the relentless motion of the sea. Every smile crack, every rust stain is a postcard from the future, warning you that the spine of your boat is quietly dissolving. Encapsulated keels do not send these signals. Their ballast is locked away, immune to saltwater's slow sabotage. But with bolt-on keels, the first sign is often the only warning you will get before the real trouble begins. Cheeky Rafiki was a Beneteau First 40.7, a boat designed to straddle the line between club racer and family cruiser. In May 2014, she vanished in the North Atlantic. No distress call, no chance for rescue. The hull was found inverted, floating 1,000 miles from shore. The keel was gone, ripped clean from the stub, leaving a ragged wound where 5 tons of lead used to hang. 4 crew were lost, and a story that every surveyor knows by heart. The official timeline reads like a slow-motion disaster. Cheeky Rafiki had grounded twice in the years before her last crossing. Each time the repairs were cosmetic, patch the stub, check the bolts, and slap on a new layer of paint. But beneath the fairing, the real damage was growing. Every hard knock sent shockwaves through the grid, flexing the stub and stretching the bolts. Stainless steel, supposedly immune to rust, was quietly dissolving in the oxygen-starved crevice between hull and keel. The signs were all there: hairline cracks, weeping rust, a drop in torque when the nuts were checked. But nobody drops a keel for a look unless they are forced to. It is expensive, it is time-consuming, and there is always pressure to get the boat back in the water. On that final passage, cheeky Rafiki hit heavy weather, force 8, steep seas, the kind of pounding that turns a joint into a lever. The stub cracked, the bolts sheared or pulled through, and in seconds, the keel was gone. The hull rolled, inverted, and became a death trap. The Marine Accident Investigation Branch found fatigue cracks in the grid, corrosion in the studs, and evidence of repeated overload. Not a single bolt was intact. The hull itself survived, floating upside down, but the ballast, the spine of the boat, was at the bottom of the Atlantic. This was not a freak accident. It was the inevitable endgame of a design that treats the keel as a removable accessory, not an integral part of the hull. When the bolts go, the whole illusion of safety goes with them. The cheeky Rafiki case is not about bad luck or rogue waves. It is about what happens when the engineering math of mass production collides with the physics of the open ocean. The lesson is written in the wreckage. If your keel is not part of the boat, sooner or later it wants to leave. Start at the bilge. Shine a light deep into the sump. If you can barely fit your hand, that is a good sign. Next, look for streaks of rust or brown drips trailing from the keel joint down the hull. That is the smile of death, a warning that water has found its way into the joint and is quietly eating your keel bolts from the inside out. Run your fingers along the joint for any sign of a crack or gasket extrusion. Bulging rubber or sealant means the bond is failing. Tap around the stub with a plastic mallet. A hollow ring is bad news. A dull thud is what you want. Check the torque on every keel nut. Any movement or looseness is a red flag. Count the studs and measure their diameter. On a 40-foot boat, you want at least a dozen, each as thick as your thumb. Use a mirror to look for pitting or corrosion on the exposed threads. Finally, ask for the grounding and maintenance history. If the boat has taken a hard knock and the keel has never been dropped for inspection, you are playing Russian roulette. This 8-point sweep is the difference between peace of mind and a ticking time bomb. A proper keel drop and inspection is not pocket change. Hauling a 40-foot boat, unbolting the keel, and checking for corrosion or stretched studs will run anywhere from 3 to 12 grand, depending on your yard and what you find. Most owners skip it, hoping a fresh coat of bottom paint hides the truth. If you want peace of mind, budget for it every decade. For those who would rather not gamble, there is a short list of safe bets. Island Packet, Pearson 365, Contessa 32, Cape Dory, and Tartan 37. Boats where the ballast is sealed inside, not hanging from rusty bolts. These models hold value, shrug off groundings, and do not hand you a 5-figure bill just to check the boat's spine. In the end, the cheapest boat is the one that does not try to kill you. Today, a 45-foot cruising condo leaves the factory not as a fortress, but as a compromise, built to fit under a highway bridge, not to withstand the unyielding sea. While the sales pitch favors speed and handling, the real trade was safety for shipping invoices. In the end, your keel is either bone or a bolt-on prosthetic. Out here, only one is truly part of you. Drop your thoughts below.